Good morning. This is Anthony Sanchez. I'm the VP of Marketing here at Customers First Now, and we're going to get started in just a second. Okay. Well, thank you for joining this morning. We typically hold these webinars on a monthly basis here at Customers First Now. So if you have probably heard our webinars before in the past, we'll also be coming with new webinars, hopefully on a monthly basis. We talk about a lot of topics, customer experience, customer success, journey mapping topics, and we hope and we've heard that our customers get a lot of value out of this, and we hope that you do as well. Before we begin, just a few key reminders. We are recording today's session for future download and replay. So you will receive an email with us to the link to access this recording probably in about a day or so. Anytime you have a question, we'd love to hear it for our panelists. You have a questions panel that you can open and send us a message. You can ask as many questions as you like, and we'll try to answer as many as we have time for. Okay, so let me get the slides started. Okay, today's presenters. In today's webinar, we're very excited. We actually have one of our customers, Rick Farr from WebPT, co-presenting with one of our senior CX consultants, Elizabeth Pitt. Rick is the VP of Operations at WebPT. He's also been CCO at a company called Smart Vault. And he has a lot of experience, over 20 years, in software, sales, customer success, operations, and quite a few other areas. He's well-versed in a lot of areas in the corporation. Elizabeth is our CX SaaS practice leader. She's also been a CCO for a SaaS CRM company. And she also has approximately 20 years of marketing, sales, and customer operations experience herself. She was a former senior associate for McKinsey, and she also comes to us with an MBA from the Chicago Booth School. And so we want to welcome them both. Rick and Elizabeth will be discussing why a company with industry-leading NPS scores, like WebPT, and excellent attrition rates, why they chose to proactively address a potential churn bubble by building a customer journey map to prioritize their customer efforts and choose to work from a customer's point of view. So thanks again for joining us today, and I'm going to turn it over to Elizabeth, if we can make sure that she's on. Elizabeth?
Hi, Anthony.
Hey, Elizabeth. So I'm turning it over to you. Go ahead.
Great. So just from an agenda perspective, there's really three things we're going to go over today. And I'm so grateful to have Rick here as my partner. It was a fantastic engagement working with him to generate fantastic customer insights, to have some great results, and that's what we'll be discussing. The first thing we'll do is have Rick give a little background on WebPT to give you context and the CX challenges that he stepped into. And then, he had a decision between leveraging his internal team and internal partners and expert partners outside of the company to be able to increase his results and increase the speed to get the CX changes that he needed. And then we're going to share some of those early results. Down at the bottom of the slide, you're seeing all of the awards for WebPT. So when Anthony mentions that WebPT is a very customer-centric, customer-delightful, high NPS, low-churn company, that's the context. And even still, they're putting their eyes firmly on customer health, customer satisfaction at a granular account level. So it's great to have Rick here. And Rick, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you to start telling our story.
Sounds great. Thanks, Elizabeth. So on the next slide, you can see, so VP of Operations, which at WebPT means I'm responsible for our support and training teams, our onboarding processes, and our success team. Over my 20 years, very focused on the customer. and their journey in various different software companies. So which brought me to WebPT about a year ago. Great healthcare SaaS company focused on the rehab industry. Very successful, over 12,000 clinics, 70,000 rehab professionals using us daily, and frankly, some of the best NPS scores in our category. Interestingly, we have everything from the SMB client all the way to very large hospital systems with thousands of clinics. But we still had a lot of opportunities to improve. We had good account attrition, meaning that our logos were staying with us, but we did have spikes in individual product churn. We had really shallow relationships with our accounts, so we didn't know them in the way that we really wanted to. And a lot of limited visibility on health scores. So it was hard for us to tell which accounts were in a good place, which accounts were in a bad place. And if they were in a bad place, what should we do about it? So no real playbooks or anything defined. And then also in this industry, we have a lot of consolidation that's happening. So as PE money's being poured in, a lot of small individual clinics are being put together to form chain. Next slide. So we spent the first month trying to, figure out a good approach for this. Wanting to really bring in our team members, from inside of WebPT. We early on decided that Gainsight would be a good tool for us to use to automate the processes that we have. But we also wanted to take a look and bring in some outside help with Customers First Now to, really validate some of our pain points that we were seeing, and more importantly, look at some of our data to help us see if we can get a little more predictive on churn. So in the first month, we spent, a lot of time interviewing our customers, the different department heads, a lot of the employees. I spent a lot of time actually reading our NPS scores, our transaction surveys, and really understanding all the comments that were inside of those. And this really kind of helped me frame what the customer's perception of that journey was. But I've learned through experience that people's recollection of the customer journey is really often different than what the customer is actually going through. So we really wanted to kind of lean into it, document what that customer journey looked like, and then test it, meaning to actually go through the process of watching a customer from the time a deal closes all the way through to see what that customer is actually experiencing. So quickly, after we documented the process, we really wanted to identify some quick wins. Really no regret moves, especially in our product onboarding process, and to find if there was anything on the product side that we heard in our verbatims that we could get back to our product team. So this helped us, kind of bring us to the point where we brought in CFN. So we instantly started looking at different process changes that we could make in onboarding, looking at our data. But early in the Customer First Now conversations, they really asked us and kind of challenged us to think about our approach a little differently. So as you know, a lot of our systems today can give you a health score, which our teams can action. But the real question always comes back to what of those actions should we take seriously? How do we prioritize that work? So, and more importantly, in this particular case, how do we get predictive about churn? So I have all of these health scores. I have playbooks assigned to them, but really which ones are most important? And then finally, once we got to that point, bring on Gainsight. Elizabeth, anything to add on this one?
Yeah, Rick, I having been in the CCO chair and and you're in the VP of Ops chair where you're running customer experience, your approach for me showed your practitioner's experience, where you've got to come in and get a lay of the land quickly with the team. But like you said, be a little bit thoughtful that the recollection or even the internal talk track may not be mirroring what's happening. And then knowing also, that you can take some action. So you've got to take action within the first 90 days, which you did. And you took the right action just based on that initial overview. But then you had the long-term view in mind as well. So you were very focused on short-term wins. So you knew long-term getting this process right and getting it automated is where you're going to be able to provide value. So your use of partners and your thinking through short and long, it was just great. And that made it easy to understand where we could add value because you were clear as a partner, how to bring us in and what activities to have us do, where you were going to fit Gainsight in. So I would say, in terms of a first 90 days best practice, the way that you got the lay of the land, identified the quick wins, and then knew how you were going to leverage partners for the 12 to 18 month plan. Very much a best practice.
Yeah, I think one of the things that kind of changed my thinking on the whole process, because we instantly came in, thought about what our best practice would look like, know that we would put in Gainsight, but to think of looking at our data in a way that was pre-putting Gainsight in was kind of a game changer for us. To really say, look, let's see if we can get predictive about the behaviors that we're seeing with our accounts, so that we can get in front of any bubbles that might be occurring with churn. Because my early conversations with Customers First Now were all about, I can tell, since we don't have relationships with our accounts, we might have some potential issues that we won't see until it just becomes a problem.
Yeah, and it was interesting. Your team, very talented folks, especially for your size, and you guys have the foresight to have a strong data skill set, meaning access to the data and smart people. But the big data, like finding the predictive, building a predictive model, you assess that you didn't have that internally. And a lot of companies, don't build that function until much later in their SaaS journey. So that was where we found that fit.
So we started, two parallel efforts. So we brought CFN in to start looking at the data, start going down that journey. We then internally looked at our customer journey and just try to, kind of rearrange some things to make it more useful for members. So I'll walk you through what it was, and then how we changed it, and then we'll talk about what those results look like a little bit later. But initially, it was we'd close the deal in sales, instantly put that customer into our onboarding process. Our onboarding process was kind of a self-onboarding process where customers would come in, we would set up your account, we'd introduce you to the company, show you all the learning materials that we had online, and dedicate ourselves to you, but more in a reactive way. So we'd point you to the training materials and watch you use them, check utilization inside the application, and when we felt good about your utilization, we would graduate you and put you into our success process. And in that onboarding window, probably 90 days on average is what we were seeing. So you can imagine going to sales, going into onboarding for 90 days. After that 90 days, getting introduced to your success member, the person assigned to your account to take care of you, and then into support. So as you can imagine, after 90 days of self-onboarding, our success team really kind of turned into a dedicated support team. So our support costs were going really high. We weren't really having relationship conversations with our accounts, and it really kind of put us in a bad place. So we really wanted to look at and see, what things we could do to instantly kind of change that experience. So we started testing some things, and so we instantly went from sales to our success team. So you close the deal. The first conversation you have is with the success person who is understanding your business drivers, wanting to talk to you about what your challenges are and what success looks like to you, and then from there puts you into an onboarding process. So switch those two things around a little bit. So instantly went into success, and then we totally rechanged and revamped the way that we thought about onboarding. So instead of onboarding in a way where we pointed you to learning materials, we actually said, let's assess the customer, understand what they know, and put more of a hands-on approach. Let's build a customized training plan for that member, and then stay with them through that training plan. And then when we get through with that, then hand it over to support, which for us, had some pretty interesting results that we'll share in a little bit. I think the biggest change, from an onboarding perspective, as you can imagine, was taking a team that was starting to get, overwhelmed with all the accounts that were currently coming on. It's a fast-growing company. We're pulling on multiple accounts there every month, and saying to that team, hey, now we're, instead of, pointing them to training materials, we actually want you to own the account and spend more time on them, which you can imagine we thought could be a little risky. Maybe there's more cost associated with that if we're actually taking all these accounts and one-on-one onboarding them through the process. So a lot of resistance at first as we thought about it. A lot of raised eyebrows, I would say, as we thought about them making that change, but we tested it and had some pretty good results, and have since, rolled that out through the team.
Well, and Rick, you're going to share, the results in terms of some of the quantification of it. But what I love about this move that you made here was it came right out of the journey work. So you were poised to execute these changes very early on. So you didn't, and that's, I think, the power of the journey mapping exercise, is it gets you clear fast, as opposed to reacting to maybe some of the themes that are popular inside the four walls of the business, or doing what we have been doing, or playing the game of whack-a-mole. The journey map makes for an interim clarity that allows you to take actions like this that, as we'll share later, had huge impact on the business.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of the key to getting us a place where we could make those improvements. I was the new guy, and so it was important to try to understand what low-hanging fruit was out there, what that journey looked like, how we could put some changes in practice immediately that would provide great results, and at the same time start looking at the data.
Okay, so then this is where, as Rick mentioned, we started looking at the data, and his team, their internal journey mapping process that they did produced our early insights. Then the part of him that says, but are we missing something? Is there any internal bias? Are we looking at the data in a way that tells the story? And can we really ground the nature of our churn, or our potential lack of renewals? What's happening in that area, so that we know what we can address versus not. And so that was the first work that we did, especially when you have a big SMB customer base. The smaller businesses are just churning by nature. They're having trouble keeping the doors open in some cases. And so the question I get when working with customers that have an SMB install base is, how much of this churn is actually addressable, and how much of it rides along with small business churn? So we found what is fairly typical with companies that have SMB, which was about 34% of accounts that were leaving WebPT left because of the small business type dynamic, the struggles to keep the doors open and grow and sustain themselves. And then there was another chunk that had to do with the fact that clinics were consolidating. So that took 50% of the accounts leaving off the table in terms of what we could address. And then we had 50% that was addressable. And so of that, a little more than half was product related, and a little less than half was customer facing. When we do this analysis at CFN, we're really looking for that customer facing bucket, because that's the action we can take immediately. We don't need to wait for a sprint cycle. We don't need to get on a roadmap. We can actually triage customer facing issues quickly. And not surprisingly, a big chunk of those customer facing issues, we did a click down, was in onboarding. So we were able to validate not only that the magnitude of these numbers were really similar to what Rick's team had identified, but also that there was a healthy chunk of leaving customers having to do with those customer-facing issues, which we knew we could take action on immediately. And then the fact that we were grounding the product issues, and again, when it clicked down and we helped the team dimensionalize which of those product issues, it made the case for the investments in the product roadmap. So it served two purposes: validate that the onboarding moves that Rick was making were really impactful and linked to retention. So it's one thing that to make a customer quote unquote happy or raise NPS. It's another thing to know that it's going to impact your retention rates. So we knew onboarding was going to have an impact on retention, and we knew that there were some product investments that would have an impact on retention. Again, getting us to those big business metrics that our CEOs and our CFOs look for.
Yeah, I thought it was also great, as we were looking at our churn numbers inside, to have, somebody externally come in and, put a second set of eyes on things, just to kind of validate that, give a little credibility. As a new person coming in, you always, question, is my data accurate? What does this look like? Am I looking at everything the right way? So to have that second set of eyes on it, to come in and help articulate this to, our executive team here, and to give me confidence that we're moving in the right direction was very helpful.
So, that first analysis was dimensionalizing, okay, what actions can we take that are linked to churn and by what magnitude? Then we got really serious with a lot of data into a predictive model. So, Rick's first question was, help me validate why churn is happening. Second, help me understand which indicators and all of this data that I have. And WebPT was great about collecting lots and lots of data, so that there wasn't a situation where we didn't have data. But Rick was saying, which factors, as I'm looking at my customer success team and their efforts, which factors within an account link to whether or not a customer stays or leaves? Now, this is our favorite type of analysis to do at at CFN, because we've just got a team that lives, eats, breathes, sleeps these types of models. They have various models that they can use depending on which one fits the data the best. And so we were able to run both CRM data and usage data through our models. And we looked at, hundreds of prediction factors that Rick's team provided to us. And we were able to isolate the top 15 factors that were the highest drivers of not only churn, but also retention. So we know that if these factors are present in an account, then they will stay. And if they're absent, that they will leave. And that starts to become really predictive and allows us to prioritize which accounts need immediate attention, which accounts maybe need attention for upsell because they're not going anywhere, and which accounts are halfway out the door and we probably can't we probably can't do anything to keep them. So, it was interesting. You can see on the left, and obviously every business has their own factors, but there are CRM type factors like the length of time a customer is a customer, like the number of products they've purchased. And then there's usage factors, which have to do with, sometimes it's logging in, how often they log in can be a usage factor, how much work they're doing in the core features of your product. So those are often the things that bubble up to the top. And there can be a couple of areas where using that area in the software is highly correlated to stickiness. And the flip side of it, and when it's not in play, is correlated to churn. So we did this analysis and isolated those top 15. And Anthony, flip slides, I just want to show how predictive this model was. And we were able to have a model that was predictive of churn more than 90% of the time. So this was a great result. And again, the WebPT team had been collecting the CRM data, which most companies do, and we had access to usage data. But we were able to build a model that was 90% predictive. By the way, 80% is highly predictive. You can make big decisions based on 80%, but we got to 90%, which was just great for the whole team. Where when we looked at the model, we have two levels of specificity, and this is a little bit nerdy, but it gets us excited. We have a specificity variable that says the percentage of active customers correctly identified by the model. So we look at the model and we say, hey, model, if you were to look at this account profile, is this account active or churned? And 91% of the time, on the specificity dimension, the model could predict that this customer was active. Flip side, the sensitivity was percentage of churn customers correctly identified. Again, you say to the model, hey, model, is this customer active or churned? 92.4% of the time it could predict a churned customer. So now we've got something that Rick has a high degree of confidence that he can leverage with his customer success managers to address the most important customers, but also things he can feed into an automation tool like Gainsight. So scores he can feed into an automation tool, usage variables he can feed into an automation tool. So this was just a fantastic analytic result.
Yeah,
Rick, I'm interested to hear your perspective.
Yeah, so pretty exciting time. So Anthony, go back to the previous slide if you don't mind. So I think what's interesting about this one, this slide, is the one that gets me the most excited. And the reason for that is beneath all of those factors, what we see are best practices and things that we might otherwise trigger our teams to act on. So what we're saying is, here's your focus area. Yes, there's 100 things that you could look at. Is your support score right? Is your marketing health score right? All these things that we would put our teams to action. We can say, look, yes, but let's focus right here. So yes, there's a lot of best practice things that we might do in, let's say, usage factor 21, for example, but we know that our focus area should be at the top. And what that translates to is more time for my teams to spend focused on customers and not chasing all these health scores that may or may not actually, move the needle on churn. All right, so Anthony, you can.
Yeah, I was going to say, Rick, that's a great point, because what's interesting is without a predictive model that prioritizes, we know there's best practices around a detractor comment on NPS, for example, or like you said, a support ticket gone south. And so, and then plus. So now you've got 25, 30, 100 things going on with a customer account. when someone sees that a factor is below a tolerance, right? This isn't as good as we expect. You put an NPS score for a touch point. You say, okay, if it's, below this, everybody galvanize effort and, do something. When you have a predictive model, you start to be able to identify things that, yes, in theory, that makes sense, but it doesn't impact customer stickiness. And that's a real game changer, because without these scores, you'd almost be remiss not to address one of these factors that seems off, unless you can say, hey, I get that that's off, but that's not going to impact whether or not this customer stays. And that's some amazing management clarity.
It's a game changer.
So this was the final output that was really impactful, and I know this really was illuminating to the executive team when we presented out. And this is not our normal findings. So WebPT, very healthy. And you can see, the healthy accounts were the preponderance of the customer base. Now, of course, we knew this based on our low churn rates and our NPS. But now we had a third way of looking at it, which was, as we stack ranked all of our health scores, and for those healthy accounts, these were health scores greater than 90, we can see the vast majority of WebPT's accounts are healthy. So that speaks to, green field for really strong upsell, cross-sell type of program. So you've got a customer success manager, and we tend to be more sensitive to the loss in front of us than the potential opportunity or gain. Here, a healthy part of the customer success strategy is about, we've got some very delighted customers. How do we help them more? How do we expand that relationship? So we got a very clear number based on a very clear scoring criteria that had to do with a predictive model that, yep, this is what's healthy. Then, the other two little pie slices, what was interesting about these is we had two. Ones that are at risk, but not out the door yet. And then those that were expected to churn. We're talking 9 out of 10 of them will churn in the next 6 months. What's important about that is a lot of companies, without this clarity, will focus a bunch of energy on the expected to churn customers. Why? Their scores are the worst. They can see that, oh, this customer is in pain. Sometimes they're in pain and there's nothing we can do about it. Maybe they were sold and it wasn't a great fit. Maybe the decision maker inside the company changed. It's one of these things where all the factors around their usage says, this is not going to change the outcome if we try to mitigate with this customer. And then you look at the at risk, that's not the case there. So if you're going to do any churn related, dissatisfaction related playbooks, then you've got this slice, the turquoise slice, is where you would put all of those efforts. And then you'd put a lot of effort also on making sure our happy customers are even happier. So I think it was fantastic to have an account level score, because it was practical for our customer success manager to prioritize his or her efforts. But this was great from a leadership perspective and resource allocation perspective that says, that little yellow slice, they're out the door. We're not spending time on them. It won't bear any fruit. The turquoise slice, those are the ones we will retrain, give them additional support, be hands-on, figure out what it is that is causing them to not be in the healthy range in terms of behavior, and try to move them towards a healthy range of behavior, and have playbooks aligned to the patterns we see. If they're not using this feature in the product, do we train them first? Do we do a reach out call first? And Rick has a lot of playbooks, but we were able to link those playbooks to these at-risk accounts, and then confidently have our upsell, cross-sell, deepening relationship strategies in play as well.
Yeah, I would just add that it's the first time with all my experience working with the customer journey and with success teams that we actually looked at some health scores and said, you know what, they're gone. Let them be gone. Let's take that energy and focus it on these other areas, which is kind of a liberating experience, not only for the team who's working and trying desperately to get customers to engage that don't want to engage, and turning that into wins and focusing some of that energy into upsell, cross-sell, where we're actually moving the needle for our sales teams, pretty big deal.
Well, Rick, and one final point too, in running churn teams, if they're